And we're looking at the second half of Nectar Devotion, chapter 46 on chivalry for this first class. So we are in the Northern Ocean, and we particularly want to acknowledge the help from Bhanu Swami and David Haberman, whose translations of Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu we have referred to extensively. And this is the mellow ocean, the nectarian mellow ocean of devotion. So we're going to look at chivalry, and Kalki is the presiding deity of chivalry. This is in the section on the 7 varieties of secondary Sthai-bhavs, which is the main topic of the Northern Ocean. And chivalry is in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu 4.3.1 to 61. And as we said, Nectar Devotion, chapter 46, second half. So the basic understanding which Rupa gives for each of these rasas is when utsaharati, enthusiastic love, attains an enjoyable nature by mixture with vibhavas, etc., it's called Vira Bhakti Rasa, or heroic devotional service. Oops. And this can appear in all types of devotees, although it will take different forms according to the primary rati of those devotees. Now, this chivalry rasa has 4 types. So the first type is the Udavira, a hero in fighting. So this is chivalrous activities in fighting. Then we have the hero in charity. And this has 2 subtypes, munificence and renunciation, one who wants to give to Krishna and one who doesn't want to take from Krishna. The third type is Dayavir, or the hero in compassion. This is someone who shows extraordinary mercy. And some authorities say that this is a subcategory of Danavir, the hero in munificent charity. Then we have the Dharmavira, the hero in righteousness, munificent in executing religious rites. And some authorities do not accept that this is part of the chivalrous rasa. Okay, so we're going to look at each of these in turn. Rupa Goswami looks at each of these in terms of vibhava, anubhava, sattvikabhava, vicharibhava, and sthai-bhava. So for the Udavira, the chivalrous fighting, the Vishaya, and we're going to have a brief time for questions on each of the 4. So after we discuss each of the 4, we'll have be able to take maybe 1 or 2 questions on each. And at the very end of this session on chivalry, we're going to have a breakout room where we're going to try to have 4 people in each breakout room, and each person will have like 2 minutes to discuss one of the categories. So be prepared to speak on any of them, because you can't have everyone in the breakout room just talk about one of them. All right. So the Vishaya, the object for Udavira, can be, it's Krishna, but one is Krishna as your opponent and one is Krishna as your spectator. So either you can be fighting with Krishna or you can be fighting with somebody else, and Krishna is watching according to what Krishna wants. Does he want to fight with you, or does he want to watch you fight with somebody else? Okay, the Ashraya, again, this is all in the area of what stimulates this rasa. The Ashraya are the devotees who stimulate other devotees in this rasa. So if we have a mood of Udavira rasa, what devotees will stimulate that for us? So there are special friends who have fortitude in fighting to satisfy Krishna. So here's an example with Krishna as the opponent. Madhava, you are very restless because you think no one can defeat you. But if you don't run away, then I shall defeat you and satisfy my friends. Another example with Krishna as the opponent is Sri Dhamma and Krishna fought with anger on the back of the Yamuna. The pride in fighting with increased desire to win astonished their friends. Rupa also gives an example that Krishna and Arjuna got into a big fight in front of Kunti. A mock fight, a friendly fight. This is chivalrous, is sport, what we call sportsmanship. Okay, like you play a game with your friends. You know, you're playing chess with your friends or Scrabble with your friends. There's some sportsmanship, or you're wrestling with your friends. Now, an example of Krishna as spectator. So Sri Dhamma stopped the countless arrows with leather tips fired by all of his friends by whirling his stick around. The son of Nanda, with hair standing on end, praised him because it appeared that Sri Dhamma was enclosed in a cage made by the whirling stick. And this creates excitement, just like we like to watch sporting events, right? We humans, we like to watch the American football or rugby or soccer or ice hockey or basketball or whatever, where there are opponents fighting in a sporting way, right? So Krishna also likes to watch that. Okay, what are the Udipenas? The other stimulants: boasting, striking the arms in challenge, rivalry, showing strength, taking out weapons, and being aroused by the words of the opponent. So example of boasting. I was just cracking up over this one. Damodar, you are brave only in eating cake. You have defeated Subala because he is weak, and you have adopted cheating means. You have advertised yourself as a serpent, and I am the peacock who will now defeat you. All right, so the Anubhav, we have different Anubhavs. Boasting for one's own self-pride, roaring like a lion, proud words, bounding about. Enthusiasm to fight even without assistance, not running away from the battle, and providing safety for fear-stricken people. An example of boasting for one's own self: Madhusudana, you know my strength, yet you are encouraging Bhadrasena and not me to challenge Baladev. You are insulting me because my arms are as strong as the bolts of the gate. Self-pride. All glories to Sudama, who, displaying great self-confidence and roaring like a lion, danced around till his hair stood on end and his eagerness of fighting increased when the proud Krishna tightened his belt with great show. Now, we had a question here about this self-pride that Krishna, we say Krishna doesn't like his devotees to be proud. Right? Prabhupada explains that when Krishna left the Rasa Leela, it was because he didn't like the gopis' pride. And in this case, he's appreciating Sudama's pride. And he also sometimes appreciates pride in the gopis, right? We talked about with conjugal love last week, how, you know, Radharani's contrary, proud nature, that she's neglecting him is pleasing to him. So the question is whether or not the mood of these is to please Krishna. That's the question. Go back to the main definition of bhakti, right? Anyabhilasita sunyam ganakarma anavritam anukulena Krishna anushivanam bhakti uttamam. So like Mother Yasoda got angry with Krishna, which actually displeased him, but her mood was to please him. And Kamsa pleased Krishna by his fighting, but his mood wasn't to please Krishna. So if having pride is directed to try to please Krishna, then it's bhakti. And if it's not, then Krishna's like, I don't like this so much. Okay, Sattvika Bhavs. This is all the Sattvika Bhavs are present in Udavira. And the Vyavichari Bhavs: arrogance, agitation, contentment, shame, understanding, happiness, dissimulation, intolerance, impatient, envy, and recollection. And the Sthai Bhav, and I find this really interesting, a very deep desire to win. That's the basic rati. It's a basic Sthai Bhav. I want to win. And this desire can be self-generated. And the example is Stoka Krishna. His father discouraged him from fighting with Krishna. But when Krishna encouraged him, his inner desire to win was such he started whirling his stick around. So an innate desire to win where Sri Dhamma says, I'm going to defeat Balaram and then I'm going to challenge Krishna. This Daibhav can be generated by companions, right? And Varutapal, when he heard from a friend, don't accept defeat, then he made all kinds of weird sounds. He ran toward the Lord. Another example of is observing innateness in companions. So observing that your companions like to fight may also be part of this Daibhav. So Sudama wanted to defeat Damodar, and then Subala, seeing that Sudama had this mood, this was the rati in him. Now, what's important to understand about this Daibhav, about this whole Udavira, is this is about fighting between friends. If there's a fight with an enemy, the devotee becomes the alambana, the ashraya of anger rasa. And in anger rasa, the eyes become red, which is absent in vira rasa. All right, we have just a very short time for questions, just like about 2 minutes. So we could take just 1 or 2 questions on Udavira, if anybody has, or comments, anybody has any questions or comments on Udavira. Yes, Vinata.
Hare Krishna. We hear that also Radharani fights with Krishna. And there is a wrestling match between the two and she wins, apparently.
Well, as Rupa Goswami says in the beginning of this section, that the Vira Bhakti Rasa applies to all the devotees, although it takes different forms. So all the devotees in all of the relationships can manifest the secondary Daibhav of Vira, although it may be one of the other 3 categories, or it may show up in a somewhat different way. So the examples he's giving of Udavira are all Sakyabhav, but he's already said that this can appear in other relationships.
True. It's difficult a little bit to imagine that the fighting would take place between the servant and the master. So maybe
well, but then it might not be Udavira. He's saying that Vira Bhakti Rasa appears in all devotees, but it might not be Udavira. It might be Danavira or Dayavira or Dharmavira. It might not be the Udavira one. Also, remember that Krishna sometimes likes to be a spectator, that Udavira is not always with Krishna as the opponent, but it can be Krishna as the spectator. And you could certainly imagine that servants can be engaged in a mock battle and Krishna could be observing.
True.
Like, let's say Krishna has servants who are part of his army and they're practicing their fighting skills in front of him. And he's observing, so. Or Krishna observing a game going on. You know, Udavira is not always just physical fighting. It could be playing chess. So Krishna's servants could certainly play chess with him in Dwarka or in Vaikuntha, or Krishna could be observing other people playing some game like that and observing the sportsmanship. And so, we have explanations that every evening in Goloka Vrindavan, Krishna watches entertainment. And so those people are probably in Dasyabhav. So the entertainment might also involve some kind of sportive games.
So fighting refers to all kinds of sporting games, not just like wrestling and these things.
Not just physical. Yeah, anything where there's a strong desire to win and there's some kind of sportsman-like game. Yes. And even if you think about in the midday pastimes, it's explained the gopis play games like that with Krishna.
And what about Holi?
Yeah, probably there's in the water, some of the water games. Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Although again, it will have a little different manifestation than with the friends.
Thank you.
We could take one more. That was a wonderful question. Advaita Krishna Prabhu?
I was wondering about the performance of religious rites or activities or organizing festivals.
We'll get there. We'll get there. We'll get there. Yeah, one at a time. We'll get there. Don't worry. Unless, the Russians start bombing America in the middle of this class, we'll get there. All right. Right now we're just doing each at a time. Okay, we have to go on. So. Okay, going to go on to Diavira. So there's two types of, sorry, Danavira. Did that say Diavira? Danavira, okay. Going on to Danavira, and there's two types: munificence, the person who gives in plenty, and renunciation, the person who doesn't want to take. So the person who gives a lot and the person who doesn't want to take. So we don't have, he doesn't list for these a Vishaya and Ashraya, he just goes right to Udipana. And an Udipana is seeing a person worthy of charity and desiring to make a sacrifice because of seeing Krishna, which impels a desire to please the Lord by helping others. So the Anubhav, the behaviors in Danavira, are giving more than you're asked. And I think about when Jesus says, you know, somebody wants your shirt, also give them your coat. If they ask you to walk 1 mile, give them 2. Talking with a slight smile, steadiness and reliability, kindness and patience. Sattvika bhavs, all the Sattvika bhavs are present in Danavira. Okay, so we're going to look at the Vyavichari bhavs for munificence, speculation, impatience, and happiness. The Sthai bhav for Danavira in munificence, a steady enthusiasm to give. So remember the rati in all of the Vir Bhakti Ras is utsaha rati. There's some kind of enthusiasm. Utsaha means literally enthusiasm or festival. All right, and there's 2 varieties of the Sthai bhav. One is you give to other people in order to make Krishna happy. It's just like if I help my granddaughter, it makes my daughter, her mother, happy, right? And then there's one who gives to Krishna directly. So either giving to other people in order to please Krishna or giving directly to Krishna. And an example of giving to others to please Krishna is Nanda Maharaj at Krishna's birth ceremony, when he was giving a munificent charity to the Brahmanas. I mean, he was giving an incredible number of cows. Bhagavatam said he was giving like millions of cows. And he's doing this for Krishna's benefit, for Krishna's happiness. An example of giving to Krishna is Maharaj Yudhisthira at the Rajasuya Yajna. He's meditating on giving Krishna sandalwood, Vajayanti garland, ornaments with rubies and gold, elephants, chariots, horses decked in gold, his family and himself. And then he's like, I don't have anything more to give. I want to give more. And Bali Maharaj with Vamandev, where he gave everything in charity to the Lord. All right, now the other aspect of Danavira is renunciation. So this is the Sthai bhav of the renunciation, one who's resolute to reject. I think so. I may be getting this wrong. Anyway, one who's resolute to reject from the Lord even rarely obtainable benedictions. So this is, if we look at sadhakas and siddhas, so a sadhaka who has firm determination with some taste for the Lord. And the Lord is eager to give him things to show to everybody, wow, this person doesn't want anything with me, but me. And then a siddha who's realize the sweetness of nectar and doesn't interested in sugar. Okay, so yeah, this is just the basic definition of what is this particular aspect of the rasa. This is the opposite of the munificent devotee. In this case, the donor is the Lord and the beneficiary is the devotee. All right, so now we're going to look at the Udipana. The stimulants is the mercy of Krishna, Krishna's compassionate conversations, and his smiles. The Anubhav of Danavir in renunciation is conviction in the descriptions of the Lord's qualities. Sattvika bhavs are all Vyavicharibhavs are resoluteness and determination. Okay, now looking at the Staibhav, again, we have this enthusiasm, this utsaha, and utsaha to renounce. So in the munificence part of Danavir, the enthusiasm is to give. In the renunciation Staibhav of Danavir, the enthusiasm is to give up, not to accept. All right, so in this Staibhav, Rupa gives an example of a sadhaka of Dhruva Maharaj, who said, now that I have a diamond, why would I want broken pieces of glass? And the very famous verse by Lord Kapiladev in 3:15:48 of the Bhagavatam, that devotees are not interested in liberation or the post of Indra. They're not interested in anything of the world. They're just fixed in Krishna. Now there's a description of a siddha. So this is a perfect devotee, someone who has an intense mood of servitude. They can gain the level of a particular subcategory of Dasya Rasa. Now, if you remember that we had discussed about in the Dasya Rasa section, that there were 3 types of Parishads and Anugas, and one of them was called the Vira. So this category applies to the Siddha devotees, the perfect devotees, who have this secondary Staibhav of Dana Vira in renunciation. And I remember we had some questions about this when we were teaching this before. These are examples of devotees who just serve Krishna. They renounced everything else. They don't serve Lakshmi, they don't serve Radharani, they just serve Krishna. They say, I don't care about Balaram, I don't care about Radharani, I don't care about Lakshmi, I don't care about Pradyumna, I don't care about anybody. I just serve. They're renouncing anything else, just serving Krishna. So a siddha in this renunciation of Dana Vira has this mood. Now, of course, being a secondary Staibhav, it's also possible for other devotees to have this mood temporarily. But the siddhas where this mood is very prominent in them are in Dasya Bhav. Okay, questions just on Dana Vira Rasa, just on the Dana Vira section, either munificence or renunciation. Any questions on Dana Vira? All right, well, if there's no questions, we will, and we have Vinita again. Yes, Vinita.
I was wondering how this, I couldn't write down all this, I guess, Anubhavas for the giver, but one was talking with a slight smile. So I was wondering how that is connected with this Staibhava, because it looks like it can be in whichever.
Well, it's not that the Anubhavas couldn't be used in other rasas. It's that particularly in this rasa, they like this Anubhava. Yes, yes, here, I'd like to give this to you. Really gives me great pleasure to give this to you.
Kind of a kind, noble disposition.
Yes.
Which is,
well, this is Vira. This is all of this is about nobility.
mm-hmm.
All 4 of the Viras are all about nobility. They're all about enthusiasm and they're all about nobility. Yes, very much so.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. All right. Now we will go on to Dayavir. So this is a hero in compassion. So somebody with a tender heart, motivated by kindness, who offers his body piece by piece to Krishna in a disguised form. Okay, looking at the Vibhava, the Vishaya is Krishna in a disguised form. I don't know, can you see that Krishna's there? He's disguised, but he's there. All right, what are the Udipenas? Now, I couldn't find a picture of Krishna suffering in a disguised form, so I took this picture of Krishna having a headache, but you can see it's Krishna. So the appearance of suffering of Krishna in a disguised form. Okay, and the Anubhavas, steadiness, tranquil stability, words of comfort, protecting someone in distress, even at the expense of one's life. And the Sattvic abhaves, all of them are present. The Charibhavs are impatience, understanding, and joy. And the Staibhav, an intense, energetic love for compassion. Again, we have this utsaha. So energetic, intense compassion. All right, and he gives an example. Now, Rupa Goswami and Srila Prabhupada, when they give this example, they don't explain the whole story. So one has to do, although Bhanu Swami wrote the whole story in his footnotes in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, or else one can do some research. So the story is that the example that Rupa gives is that Krishna came to King Mayuradhwaja in the garb of a Brahmana. Krishna demanded from him half his body to be sawed off by his wife and son, and King Mayuradhwaja agreed to this proposal. That would mean peacock flag. So what is the whole story? So King Mayuradhwaja had taken Yudhishthira's Ashwamedha horse to be used in his own sacrifice. So when you're going to do these sacrifices, you send out this challenge horse, and the various kings can either pay money to the emperor for his sacrifice, showing their subordination, or they can challenge. And when they challenge, there's going to be a fight. So this king challenged, he says, I'm just going to take Yudhishthira's horse for my own sacrifice. And Krishna and Arjuna, and I'm sure with others, had been taking this horse around to different kingdoms. So when Krishna saw that this horse was taken, he came in disguise as a Brahmana. And this reminds us, of course, of the fight with Jarasandha, who also didn't accept Yudhishthira, and where Krishna also took the form of a Brahmana. And he went to King Mayuradhwaja, and he said, my daughter is going to be married, and her fiance was taken by a lion. And in order to release my future son-in-law, I need to offer the lion something else. I need to offer him half of someone's body. Can you please give me half of your body to give the lion? Well, it must have been a very unusual lion who was a negotiating lion. And then King Mayuradhwaja's wife said, well, the wife is considered to be the left half of the husband's body. So just take me, take all of me. I'm the left half of my husband's body. And Krishna said, no, the lion, this is a very particular lion. He only wants the right half of someone's body. So the king said, all right, said to his wife and son, cut me in half and give this Brahmana the right half of my body. So before they could start cutting, the king's left eye was crying. And I found this next part of the story perhaps the most interesting and the most conducive to my own introspection about what I do for Krishna and what I may ask others to do for Krishna. One second, I need to take care of something. Thank you. So when Krishna saw the left eye crying, he said, forget it. I don't want you to give something if you're feeling regret. So Krishna was interpreting this crying as I don't really want to give it. And it really made me think about how it's very important that what I give to Krishna, I give willingly, I give wholeheartedly. And it's very important that I not pressure people directly, indirectly, subtly, whatever, to give something that they're unwilling to give, or that they have any hesitancy about giving. So Krishna's like, you have any hesitancy? I don't want it. And then Krishna said, and then the king said, no, this crying is not a hesitancy. I was crying out of my left eye because you only want the right side of my body, and the left side of my body was sad that it couldn't also be offered. I wanted to offer my whole body. So at that point, Krishna embraced the king. He reveals that he's Krishna. He says, go ahead and do your yajna with your horse. So then, of course, the horse comes back to life in the yajna. Then Krishna takes the horse after Madhurajwaja's yajna and takes it back to Yudhisthira. So Rupa Goswami makes the point that if Madhurajwaja knew the Brahmana was Krishna, he would not have displayed such compassion. And then he would be in the category of the Dhanavira, one who gives to Krishna in surrender. They wouldn't have had this compassion mixed in. Now, there are, as we said, some authorities who say that this is really just Dhanavira. It's just a variety of Dhanavira. And now we want to also distinguish Dayavira from piety. So this king always had rati for the Lord. So he was giving as part of his bhakti. And again, some authorities say this would be Dhanavira, when you give charity to others thinking it will please Krishna. Now we want to also distinguish Dayavira from parental rasa or karuna rasa, compassion rasa. So in Vatsalya or Karuna, parental or compassion rasa, Krishna appears helpless and in need of care, but he's not in the disguised form. So like that picture I had of Krishna having a headache would actually be Karuna rasa, although I just could not find a picture of disguised Krishna in distress. All right, so questions on Dayavir. So just Dayavir, not any other part. And it looks like we have two things in the chat. Krishna's son did it, not the king. The king's son did what, Vinata?
Yeah, it's minor detail. From Bhanuswami, it says that the king's son stole the horse, not the king.
Well, but he stole it for the king.
Yeah, okay. But I have a question.
And that would actually be, it would be important because when Krishna was with the horse, he wasn't in disguise. So if the king himself had stolen the horse with his own hand, he would have seen that there was Krishna with the horse. And when Krishna showed up, he shows up as a Brahmana. That when we say the king stole the horse, it doesn't necessarily mean that he did it with his own hand.
Okay. Can I ask the question?
Yes, of course.
Yeah, I was thinking about this story, this whole story, this king is a little bit too much for me. Like, I know that there are such kind of stories in different religions when such things are asked, but somehow in Bhagavatam, we don't find Krishna in such a role that he's asking something so apparently cruel, or extreme from other persons. So I suppose this story is not from, I'm sure I read Bhagavatam, I haven't seen it in Bhagavatam.
No, it's not in the Bhagavatam, it's in other, I actually noted where it was from, although I didn't write that down. I don't know. I think what Krishna asked of Bali was also very extreme. Bali is given as the example of Dhanavir, not Dayavir. Although it's interesting because in one sense, Krishna was sort of kind of disguised with Bali also.
Yeah, but here he's not asking only something, but he's asking the people who love this person to cut him in two. It is something what Jamadagni asked from.
Well, if you go to the original story, Krishna didn't ask. He didn't ask the wife and son to cut him. That was the king's. Krishna said, "I want the half of your body," and it was the king who asked his wife and son to cut him in two.
Oh, like that.
Not Krishna. Krishna does sometimes ask things of us that appear to be very cruel. Have you not noticed that in your own life?
Yes, but yes, I have.
Yeah, I mean, Krishna has definitely asked me for things that, you know, I'm like, you want that?
Yeah.
He also, another thing to keep in mind is that these are kshatriyas. This is a vira ras. This is a ras of heroism. And one of the moods of a kshatriya is being, look, you know, if you're going to go into battle, people who go into battle, soldiers, military people, not all kshatriyas are military people. I mean, senators and judges and lawyers are also kshatriyas. But military people who go into battle, they already have a mood of giving their body or their head or their arm. You know, that's already their thing. It's not my thing, but it's, you know, that is the mood of a kshatriya. And they're, you know, an ordinary kshatriya in the world, they're willing to give the right half of their body in service of their country.
Yeah, that makes sense, especially when you said that it was not the Krishna who asked the wife and the son, but the king.
No, it wasn't Krishna, it was the king. The king said to his wife and son, cut my body in half to give to this Brahmana.
So that puts him in a better light in my heart.
Yeah, well, he's at that, then he's a superhero. You know, there's a super enthusiasm. And he's thinking Krishna will be so pleased with me. He loves Krishna. He's a pure devotee. And he's thinking Krishna will be so pleased with me to serve a Brahmana like this.
Incredible.
All right. And Kasturika asked about Jarasandhar. No, because Jarasandhar is a demon. And so there's no rati. Advaita Krishna Prabhu.
What about Krishna asked the head of Ghatotkacha so that he would neutralize him for the battle of Mahabharata?
Asked for the head? Well, he asked Ghatotkacha, he asked that that Ghatotkacha be willing to sacrifice himself in the battle.
But did Krishna trick him and ask him, you owe me by Guru Dakshin, and it's time you give it now, and I want your head?
Oh, I don't know all the details.
It's Mahabharata, because
I know Ghatotkacha was killed by Karna's Shakti weapon. But it certainly seems that there's some of this involved. I mean, look, you got a battle, so you've got Vira is involved with anyone who's a devotee of Krishna, and they're fighting in the battle. You've got Vira involved to some extent. But you also have, remember, when you're fighting against demons, it becomes anger rasa rather than Vira rasa. But if Krishna is asking for something as some sacrifice, then for him directly, then some Vira rasa would be involved. Yes. All right. And Prabhupada Priya, this is the last one, then we have to move on.
Hare Krishna. I'm wondering why Krishna has to always be in a disguised form for Dayavira to be there.
Because if he's not in a disguised form, it becomes Karuna Rasa instead of Vira Rasa, instead of Dayavira Rasa.
Okay.
Because then you're feeling compassion for Krishna. Whereas this is more, it's actually similar to the Dana Vira, where, you know, I'm giving charity to people to please Krishna. So I'm not in, this is not a surrender to Krishna. It's I'm giving charity to please Krishna. So again, some authorities say this, the Dayavir is not a separate category, that it is in a subcategory of Dhanavir. So some say, well, when Krishna is disguised, then it's a different mood. And it's feeling sorry for the person. It's feeling compassion more than giving in charity. I mean, of course, you could say giving your body is giving in charity. Giving in charity isn't just money.
Because the first thing I thought of was, you know, in relation to the description of compassionate heart, offering oneself to Krishna, who apparently suffers, is, you know, Krishna having a headache or stepping on thorns as he goes to the pasturing grounds.
Yeah, well, that's Karuna Ras. because you know it's Krishna. So you're not feeling heroic.
Yeah.
No,
the
if you
Veera
think
is
about this,
absent.
this feeling of heroism, the Stai Bhav is I'm loving the feeling of heroism. So when you're feeling compassionate that Krishna's stepping on thorns on the ground, you're not having this feeling of heroism. Does that make sense? The inner feeling is different. The rati
Krishna
and the
has a
rasa
headache,
is a different.
When Krishna has a
Yeah, but
headache,
you're
it could be
still
that I'm
not
going to
feeling
save him.
like you're a hero. It's closer to lamentation and pity rather than heroism. It's a different inner sense. And if you think of this in terms of drama, are you crying out of compassion and empathy, or are you enthused by giving and heroism and sportsmanship? The taste is significantly different. Although if you look at the Vyavichari Bhavs, some of the Vyavichari Bhavs may be in common. I haven't actually looked at that. But that would be something to look at. Are there Vyavichari Bhavs in common with Karuna Ras and these types of Veera Ras? That would be something. Maybe you could look at that and let us know. All right. Now we're going to the last category, which is Dharma Veera. So we're not looking here at he doesn't give a Vishaya, so just looking at the Ashraya. So what is the shelter of Dharma Veera? And again, this is in the category of a stimulus. So those who want to engage in Dharma Veera, these sorts of devotees are stimulus. And Rupa describes the Dhira Prasanta personality. So you remember that Krishna has 4 main types of personality: the Dhiradatta, Dhira Prasanta, and Dhira Lalita. So devotees who are Dhira Prasanta, they are the Ashraya for Dharma Veera, people who are peaceful, brave, who tolerate suffering, use discrimination, are modest, and they're fixed in Dharma. And Udipenas are hearing authorized scriptures which describe what is Dharma. So hearing descriptions of Dharma. Again, if you want to think about, this in terms of theatrics, and this is of course coming from Bharat Muni. So there may be some narration, fiction or nonfiction, of people who are particularly dharmic. And it's that inspiration. I want to be righteous. So the anubhavs are proper conduct, adherence to scriptural rules, tolerance, following rules of sense control, and going on to Sattvika Bhava. So all the Sattvika Bhavas, Vyavichari Bhavas, are understanding and recollection. So understanding what is Dharma and remembering what is Dharma. Now the Stai Bhav. So again, we have this utsaha. And we have this energy, this energetic love for righteousness, and with a strong adherence to righteousness alone. And an example is Yudhisthira, where he was doing all of these sacrifices just to please Krishna. And he was inviting the demigods, and Indra was going to so many sacrifices that Sati Devi was always crying from his wife. So he had a question about her hand on her cheek. So, if you're pining, you might be resting your chin on your cheek and, where's my husband? He's never home. He's always at Yudhisthira sacrifices. And she was doing that so much that her hand actually made a handprint, an impression on her cheek, because she was pining so much. And this is people who execute religious rituals for the satisfaction of Krishna. They are steady. They have this Stai Bhav. But people who do religious rituals without intending to please Krishna can just be called pious. Now, we had a question about worshiping of demigods in the spiritual world. So there's this famous verse in the Bhagavatam, I think in the second canto, with the description of the kingdom. Yes, it's in the second canto in the chapter 9, where right before Brahma receives the Chatra Sloki, saying that both the demigods and the demons worship the Lord as devotees in the spiritual world. And it's explained in the Brihad Bhagavatamrita, and also, what is that name of that scripture? Lagu, that these appearance of demigods and demons is apparent. It's there for pastime purposes. And so there are big, ritualistic ceremonies going on in Vaikuntha to please the Lord. Also, we know that in Vraja, there's some demigod worship. We know Radharani is worshiping the sun god. One could say that Surya Narayan, Chandrali is worshiping Gauri. Of course, these are all Leela. But some of this going on may also be in this Dharma Vira mood. Let us be righteous to please Krishna. Now, some authorities say that Dharma Vira is not a subcategory of heroism. Now, just to review that in the discussion on the Shanta Ras, on the neutral Ras, one of the ways that one can attain to the neutral Ras is people who are in Dharma Vira, Dana Vira, and in this world, and Daya Vira, who are compassionate in this world. If they don't have a sense of being the doer, so if people are doing righteous, charitable, and compassionate work in this world, if they have no concept of being the doer, that can bring them to Shanta Rasa, can bring them to pure devotional service in neutrality. I thought that was interesting. We studied it, and I thought it should be brought up again here. Okay, any questions on Dharma Vira? Anyone have any questions on Dharma Vira? Yes, Prabhupada Priya.
I was just thinking that all of these are supposed to be, relationships with Krishna or devotees of Krishna. But this Dharma Vira seems a little bit like, just the person desires to do the right thing and knows the laws of Dharma and just does the right thing,
But he does the right thing to please Krishna. He's doing the right thing to make Krishna happy. What is the right thing? The right thing. Remember that the Udipana is reading the scriptures. So Krishna gives Dharma to Sakshat Bhagavad Pranita. Dharma comes from Krishna. I give an example. I've given this example a lot in my various classes. So I have two sons, and each of them has a dishwasher. So when I visit each of my sons, I often help out in the kitchen. I cook and I help clean up, and But each of them has different ways that they want to load the dishwasher. And one of my sons, he won't put anything in the dishwasher that has printing on it, like a glass measuring cup that has the measurements printed on it. He won't put that in the dishwasher. He says that the printing will go off. And he won't put wooden items in the dishwasher. My youngest son puts everything in the dishwasher. And he says, if it gets ruined, that means we weren't supposed to have it. So they have a different mood. So when I visit my oldest son, I don't put the wooden spatula in the dishwasher. When I visit my youngest son, I do put the wooden spatula in the dishwasher. Why? Because I want to please them. Now, if I'm doing that because I want to be a good mother, that's different than if I want them to be happy. So a person doing Dharma because they want to think of themselves as a good person is probably in Rajaguna or Sattvaguna, and is part of Ahankara. But if somebody wants to follow Krishna's rules so Krishna will be pleased, then that's Dharma Vira Rasa. So like Yudhishthira is doing all these yagyas because he wants to please Krishna. He wants Krishna to be happy. He actually says that with the Rajasuya sacrifice. I want to glorify you. That's my purpose. But if one does it out of a sense of ego, I want to be a good person, then that's generally in Rajaguna and maybe in Sattva. Does that make sense? I mean, and it's the same with this can apply also to sadhakas. So we have our various, we have our 4 regulated principles, which are dharma. They're not directly bhakti. So why are we following the 4 regulated principles? Are we doing that to please Krishna and Guru, or are we doing that so we can have some inner sense that I'm a good person? And so I can, materially like myself as a good person. Why am I taking care of my family? Or why am I taking care of my friends? Why am I taking care of other devotees? Why am I doing what I'm doing? If I'm trying to follow the rules of sadhana bhakti, why am I chanting my rounds? Am I chanting my rounds because that way I can be a card-carrying member of ISKCON and I'll be fed? Somebody will give me prasadam and they'll ask me to give class. They'll give me a room to stay in and they'll say I'm a good devotee, or am I chanting my rounds to please Guru and Krishna? What's motivating me? So this is true even for us. Am I trying to just say I'm a good person and trying to please other jivas in a materialistic way, or trying to have some self-concept of who I am, then I'm a good person? I mean, therefore, Raghunath Das Goswami says, give up all conceptions of dharma and adharma. So all conceptions of I am a good person or I'm a bad person. Not I'm a bad person in a self-disparaging way, but, I'm a bad person, I'm a rebel, any kind of pride in oneself, and just try to serve Krishna. All right, so we're going to go now to a breakout room. And we want no more than 4, should try to get 4 people in each breakout room, and each person should give their realization, just 2 minutes for each person, on one of these viras. So on the Udivira, the Dhanavira, the Dayavira, and the Dharma Vira. So each person should pick one and speak on it just for like 2 minutes. Okay, so we're going to go into a breakout room. So now we are going to go on to Nectar of Devotion, chapters 47 and 48, on compassion, anger, fear, and ghastliness. Okay, and our acknowledgements for this section are to Banu Swami, David Haberman, Hari Parshad, and David Bukta, who were of great help. So we're in the northern section again of Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, and we're going first to compassion or lamentation. And Lord Ramachandra is the presiding deity. This is the secondary Stein Bhav. Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu 441 through 16. This is the first half of Nectar Devotion, chapter 47. So the basic understanding, when Shokarati, so that's lamentation, when it's nourished in the heart by suitable vilbhavas and other elements, it's called Karuna Bhakti Rasa. And what is the vibhava? So we have the Vishaya, the object of compassion. Now this is interesting because the Vishaya is usually just Krishna, but here it's not just Krishna. It's Krishna when he appears to be in misfortune, Krishna's dear ones, and one's own dear ones. I was just thinking also in regard to what we had studied last class with Dhanavir and Dayavir, when Bali gives everything to Vamandev, Vamandev doesn't seem to be in trouble, but when Madhurajwaja gives everything to Krishna, who's in disguise, Krishna appears to be in trouble. So this is Karuna Ras, compassion for Krishna, for Krishna's devotees, or for one's own family and friends to please Krishna. The ashraya, the shelter, again, this is in terms of a stimulus, is according to the three Vishayas, there's three ashrayas. So one ashraya is those who witness Krishna in a tragic situation, those who witness Krishna's dear associates in a tragic situation, and those who witness the relatives of Krishna's dear associates, or your own relatives, or your own dear ones, doesn't have to be bodily relatives, in a tragic situation. So we had a question as to whether or not preaching could be part of Karuna Rasa. That in Bhagavatam 7.9.44, Prahlad Maharaj, who's a famous devotee in Dasi above, that he expresses his compassion. So the answer is, of course, yes. One could think of these others as Krishna's dear ones or as one's own dear one. And the question was also asked, could this category include animals and plants? Yes, you could see animals and plants as Krishna's dear ones or as your dear ones. Now, Rupa notes that Shanta Ras devotees are not generally an ashraya. So when the devotees are feeling this Karuna Ras, they're not generally stimulated in this Karuna Ras by meditating on devotees in Shanta. And one reason may be, again, turning to Bhagavatam 7.9.44, where Prahlad Maharaj discusses that those who are in neutrality are not generally preachers filled with compassion. Now we know that in Shanta Ras, some of the Anubhavs are stepping forward to give speeches. So there may be some preaching, but that preaching is not generally motivated by compassion. It's motivated by just a feeling of bliss in the Lord, not compassion for others. So generally, the Shanta Ras devotees don't inspire others in compassion. So Udipenas, the stimulants, are Krishna's actions, qualities, and forms. The Anubhav, drying of the mouth, moaning or lamenting, slackening of the body, heaving, breathing or sighing, crying, falling on the ground, beating the chest. So this is this feeling of compassion, of caring. And all the sattvic abhaves are present. Vyavichari bhavs, laziness, frustration, defamation, humility, anxiety, moroseness, eagerness, restlessness, madness, death-like symptoms, forgetfulness, disease, and illusion. Now, what we notice here is not self-disparagement. So self-disparagement was the first of, we're here in the Vyavichari bhavs. Self-disparagement was one of the first Vyavichari bhavs that Rupa Goswami discussed when he talked about Vyavichari bhavs in the Southern Ocean. So this is not lamentation for oneself. This is not, oh, I'm such a bad devotee. I have so many problems. We'll see in fear that there's some of the self-disparagement, that, oh, I'm an offender. And we see some of this in an extreme form in ghastliness. Now, we do talk about self-compassion. Self-compassion is treating yourself with kindness. It's not self-disparagement. Okay, we have a chat from Rukmini that Prabhupada says impersonalists end up going into altruism, but that's as a fall down. First of all, the Shanta Ras devotees are not impersonalists. They may have come from impersonalism. So one category of Shanta Ras devotees come from impersonalism to personalism, and one category comes from performing austerities to personalism. But Shanta Ras, it's a Ras. They are in love with the form of the Lord. They are not impersonalists. And when Prabhupada's talking about impersonalisms who go into compassionate work, so it's a fall down into sattva-gun or sometimes into rajagun. Okay, the sthai bhav of compassionate rasa, sorrowful love. So, in theatrics, which is the basis of Bhagavad Muni, if you think about, books and movies, whatever, that make you cry and that you feel sorry for the persons that are involved. You feel sorrowful for them. You could see how this might be connected with Danavira, that because you feel sorry, therefore your heroism is aroused. And we will be studying week after next. Next week we have a vacation for Gaur Purnima. A week after next, we will be studying which rasas are compatible with each other. Yes, I finished speaking on self-compassion. Self-compassion, again, is encouraging, it's not disparaging. Self-compassion is where you're like, you know, yes, I am loved. Yes, I am taken care of. Yes, I am enough. That's self-compassion. Self-compassion is not self-disparagement. Self-disparagement is I'm so low, I'm so fallen, I'm so terrible. That's exactly the opposite of self-compassion. If you're feeling sorrowful for someone, you don't tell them how terrible they are. You give them comfort. So self-compassion is comforting. This Karuna Rasa is comforting. It's not disparaging. So Krishna as the object of lamentation. So Rupa Goswami gives two examples of Kaliya, that in general lamenting, and then Yasoda particularly lamenting that Krishna was in the coils of the Kaliya serpent. And Krishna's devotees, Balaram lamenting that Sankachyuta took Krishna's girlfriends. His face became increasingly blue with sorrow. And this I found the most fascinating. So when Lord Brahma apologized to Krishna after stealing the boys and the calves, and then his helmet touched Krishna's toenails. So Narada Muni is meditating on this, and he's feeling great compassion for his impersonalist friends. So his associates, his friends who were impersonalists, how they couldn't know Krishna's toenails. And then we have another example in the Staibhav of compassion for one's relatives or one's dear ones. So of course, Pandu and Madri left this planet without ever having met Krishna. You know, Arjuna and Krishna are contemporaries. Arjuna was born in the forest. Before that, Krishna hadn't appeared. And then Pandu and Madri left their bodies in the forest without going back to Hastinapur. So later, Sahadev, seeing Krishna's footprints, he was filled with sorrow for that his father and mother had never seen Krishna's footprints. Rupa Goswami makes the point that you can have humor without love, but you can't have compassion without love. And the intensity of the compassion one feels is directly proportionate to the intensity of love that one feels. Now, in the category of compassion for Krishna directly, this has to have an unawareness of the Lord's greatness, but this unawareness comes from love, not ignorance. So it's a kind of yogamaya. It's not that you're just a fool. It's that you love Krishna so much in such a high level, you forget his greatness. And Jiva Goswami comments, he says, this realization of sweetness is the most excellent taste or rasa attained through a special type of prema, produced from a sadhana possessing such sweetness of emotion. Therefore, the covering of awareness of the Lord's power by realization of his sweetness is actually the highest type of knowledge. And turning against that sweetness through realization of Brahman is ignorance. I thought that was very profound. And Rupa makes the point, as he made previously when he talked about the secondary Staibhavas in the Southern Ocean, that it may appear that this great sorrow is the opposite of happiness, but it produces great happiness. And the example is given, you know, as Ram is the presiding deity of this Karuna Rasa. So the Ramayana is full of sorrow, but yet it's very pleasurable to study the Ramayana, and Hanuman is doing it perpetually. Okay, moving on to anger. Parasuram is the deity, presiding deity of anger. So this is Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu 451 through 33, the second half of Nectar of Devotion, chapter 47. So basic understanding is when Krodarati is nourished by Vibhavas, etc., it becomes Rodra Bhakti Rasa. So the Vibhava, we have the Vishaya, and again, we have a situation with three Vishayas, not all of whom are Krishna. So one is Krishna, you can be angry at Krishna. One is you can be angry at friendly persons who are friendly to Krishna and friendly to oneself. You can also be angry at those who are unfriendly to Krishna or unfriendly to oneself. So these are the three Vishayas, three objects of Krodha Rati. So why would one be angry at Krishna? So when Krishna cheats a young girl, or regarding Krishna's improper behavior. Why would you be angry at people friendly to Krishna? When they're inattentive to protect Krishna, when they rashly send Krishna into danger, or when they're angry at Krishna without cause. Why would you be angry at people unfriendly to Krishna? When they interfere with your relationship with Krishna, or where they are enemies of Krishna. So this is the explanation of the three Vishayas. And the Ashrayas. So there's two different categories. So those who are the Ashrayas for anger at Krishna are mostly women. So these are either the Sakis or the elderly women. And as far as anger with the object of friendly or unfriendly, that can be anybody. I have a picture here of Nanda being swallowed by the snake and the cowherd men being angry at the snake. Okay, an example of the Saki's anger at Krishna. Radha, why were you so much in love with the lusty cowherd Krishna covered with so much deceit? An example of older women being angry with Krishna when they see him associated with young women. Oh, you thief of young girls' properties, I can distinctly see the covering garment of my daughter-in-law on your person. So, of course, these older women are also filled with rati for Krishna, with love for Krishna. So this is an anger based on their love. Okay, looking further at Ashraya. So those who become angry at friendly persons, there's three different times, as we mentioned. So inattention in protecting Krishna, rashness at taking Krishna into dangerous situations, or jealousy that makes them unnecessarily angry at Krishna. We'll look at each of these in turn. So this is an Ashraya again. This is a devotee who's the shelter of anger at an inattentive, friendly person. So an example is when Rohini gets angry at Yasoda because Mother Yasoda tied Krishna up between those trees and put him in danger. She was inattentive. She didn't notice that the trees were loose. Then an Ashraya, example of an Ashraya, devotee who's the shelter of anger. Again, the Ashrayas are impetuses. So for one's own feeling of anger. So an impetus is a shelter of anger at a reckless, friendly person. So Yasoda was angry at the cowherd boys when she heard that they had taken Krishna into the Taliban forest. And again, we're in the category of Ashraya, a devotee who's the shelter of anger at a jealous, friendly person. So an example of this is one of Radharani's friends who says, oh, Radha, go away. I'm burning up just being near you. Though the peacock feather in Krishna's hair touched your toes when he bowed down with you, you were still red-faced with anger. All right, then Ashraya categories of being angry at unfriendly persons. So again, this is when we would feel this anger rasa, these devotees are our inspiration. So an example is the elderly gopis being angry at Akrura, taking Krishna from Vrindavan. And then with enemies of Krishna, those who were angry at Shishupal in the Rajasuya Yagya act as ashrayas, or the shelter of anger. And Udipenas are sarcastic laughs, deceptive speaking, frowns and disrespect expressed by Krishna, enemies of Krishna, and by friendly persons. What are the anubhavas? Rubbing of the two hands, clacking the teeth, rapid breathing, lowering the head, clamping of the lips, moving of the eyebrows, flinging the arms, uttering of strong words, nodding of the head, glancing with hostility, yellowness in the eyes, trembling lips. Sattvika bhavas, all of them are there. Vyavichari bhavas, great emotion, bewilderment, pride, frustration, illusion, carelessness, jealousy, dexterity, negligence, and fatigue. Looking at the sthai bhava. So angry love is the basic connection, and it has three flavors of the sthai bhava depending on the Vishaya. All right. I spent a lot of time trying to understand this, and I'm going to do the best that I can. So Rupa gives 3 types: Kopa, Manu, and Rosha. So Kopa is the type of Staibhav, the type of Rati one has if your Vishaya is unfriendly people. This comes from the Sanskrit word kup, which is used in the context of anger in general, Krodha. Manu, its main meaning is lamentation, but its secondary meaning is anger. Manu is used in, again, lamentation, dainya, and anger. Then Rosha comes from the word Rusha, which is used in the concept of himsa, giving trouble to others. That I got with help from Hari Parshad, and then David Bukta helped me with the following. He says here that Rupa is following Simha Bhupala. So Simha Bhupala expanded on the work of Bharat Muni. He said that Bharat Muni's treatment of this is rather simplistic. For Bharat, these things might be translated as rage. Kopa may be translated as rage and is really focused on demons. Simha Bhupala appears to have a lot to say about the Staibhav side of this, and the whole thing of dividing the Staibhav into 3 comes from him. However, he, instead of breaking Krodha into Kopa, Manu, and Rosa, he breaks it into Krodha, Amarsha, and Rosa. And he doesn't seem to ultimately undercut Rosa, which Rupa Goswami does. That's for all you technical people. All right, now Rupa asks whether this is a secondary Staibhav or Vyavichari Bhav, because there are 3 Vyavichari Bhavs that are related to these 3 Staibhavs. So Ogra, ferocity directed to enemies; Amarsha, indignation or impatience; Amarsha means not patient, directed to friends; and Asuya, fault-finding, romantic jealousy directed to the lover. So there are 3 very, very similar Vyavichari Bhavs. Then Rupa Goswami undercuts the Rosha aspect, and he says that, which is the anger at Krishna, the Staibhav, the anger of Krishna. And he says, for the women lovers who are filled with Madhurya Ras, anger called Rosha directed to Krishna is not a Staibhav. It's a Vyavichari Bhav. Now, for the lovers' friends and for the lovers' older women, when they're angry at Krishna, it's a Staibhav in Rodra Rasa, and it is Rosha. Now, the Anubhavas of Kopa, which is the Staibhav when it's directed at enemies, is like wringing the hands. And an example is Balaram being angry at Jarasandha. He had eyes like burning coals, and he glanced at its plow, capable of devouring the flesh of a multitude of enemies, when Jarasandha was insulting Krishna. Okay, going to Manu, this is anger at friends. Anubhavas will be silence and so forth. Right, well, sometimes when you're angry at your friends, you just don't say anything. There's an example of Manu against friendly people who are elders, Radha de Purnamasi. When I shout to call someone, Krishna covers my mouth. When I try to flee, he blocks the path. When I bite my lower lip, he falls at my feet repeatedly. Please tell me how I can protect myself from Krishna. Manu, which is against friendly persons with equals. Jatila says, ugly face Mukara, hearing your words, the core of my life is burning up. And Mukara says, oh, Jatila, hearing your words, my head is burning up. Tell me, fool, when did Krishna arrogantly touch my granddaughter? Okay, Manu, which is friendly people against inferiors. An example was Jatila. She was angry at Radha's Sakis, who were her inferiors, when she saw them quickly taking off a pearl necklace from Radha that Krishna had given, or Krishna's necklace. And she says, this girl, a black sprout in my family, is cheating me with duplicity. Okay, Anubhavas of Rosha are like the eyes turning pink. And Rupa Goswami says that it may not be clear when there's anger amongst friendly persons and they are angry at Krishna, they're angry at, it may not be clear, love for Krishna may not be clear, it may not appear that they're having love for Krishna, but it is there. And the nature of anger and love is that the anger of enemies, so Shishupal's anger at Krishna is not a rasa. All right, any questions on compassion or anger? Don't have much time, but any questions? You take 1 or 2 questions on either compassion or anger. Okay, well, if there's no questions, we will move on. To what probably calls dread, or also fear. Dread implies that it's anticipatory. So Prabhupada uses the word dread, but I've also put the word fear because fear is in the present. Dread is more something, thinking of something in the future. Right. This is from Bhakti Rasamrita to Sindhu 4:6, 1-16, Nectar of Devotion, chapter 48, first half. So basic understanding, as Rupa gives all the time, when Bhaya-rati is nourished by vibhavas and other elements, it becomes Bhayanika Bhakti Rasa. Now here is where we have the self-disparagement that I've offended the Lord. So one is afraid that I've done something wrong. And the other is afraid that Krishna is going to be hurt. Those are the two types. So vibhava. So we have the first type where one is afraid that one has offended Krishna. Krishna is the cause. In that case, the ashraya, where one is afraid that one has offended Krishna, are servants or sons who commit offenses to Krishna. Of course, it could be others as well. But there's usually some reverence here. You know, I'm going to get in trouble with Krishna. Krishna is going to be angry with me. So it's mostly, the ashraya is mostly subordinates. An example of fear is with Jambavan. When Riksharaz was fighting Krishna, and then he realized, oh, Krishna is God. And then Krishna said, recover your composure. You've not committed any offense. In displaying your valor mixed with anger, you have served me greatly with this sporting fight. Another example of fear due to offense was Kaliya. When Kaliya realized that Krishna was God, he became very frightened of how he had offended Krishna. Or the second type, again, is when one is afraid that someone else is going to hurt Krishna. So here the demons are the cause instead of Krishna. So the demons are acting as the Vishaya. And there's three examples. So seeing enemies of Krishna, hearing about enemies of Krishna, or remembering about enemies of Krishna. So an example of seeing is Yasoda. She says, oh, Nanda, protect this restless child by keeping him within the house. Keshi demon is agitating my mind as well as the earth. See, he's jumping over the trees. An example of the Vishaya of hearing about demons. So hearing that Keshi had entered Gokula with anger, Yasoda became alarmed to protect her son, and her lotus-like face dried up. Or remembering. Now this has some significance because the secondary sty bhavs, as opposed to the Vyavichari bhavs, leaves a permanent impression, whereas the Vyavichari bhavs don't. So although Putana is gone, Yasoda, she's talking to a friend and she's remembering, and she says, quiet, stop talking about Putana who came to eat my son, deceiving me and making frightful sounds. Just remembering her makes my body tremble. So the ashraya here are the devotees who are afraid for Krishna's safety. So again, these are stimulants for others in this fearful ras. When they meditate on those who are afraid for Krishna's safety, they also feel stimulated in their fear for Krishna's safety. So Udipana, frowns and other threats in the object of fear. So seeing, hearing about, or remembering these objects of fear for Krishna acts as the Udipana. Okay, Anubhav for the fear rasa in general, for either of these, drying up of the mouth, heavy breathing, glancing behind oneself, concealing oneself, bewilderment, searching after the endangered lovable object or looking for shelter, and crying very loudly. So sattvika, all except tears. Rupa says there's not crying in this. Fear rasa vyavicharis are alarm, death-like symptoms, unsteadiness, illusion, forgetfulness, agitation, depression, and grief, confusion, expectation, danger. So again, this very much goes with, feeling, oh, I'm an offender. Staibhav. So the basic connection is fearful love arising from offenses or scary beings. And I put this picture, a gopi watching Krishna with Kaliya. So Kaliya, who has this fear of his offenses, and this resident of Vrindavan who's afraid for Krishna's safety. Now, Rupa points out that fearful love due to offenses, here we have Jagai and Madai, only arises in those who knows Krishna's kindness. But the fear of demons can arise in any devotee, but it especially arises in women and small children. And for these fearful demons, or fearful enemies, doesn't have to be a demon, they can have a fearful form like Putana, they can have a fearful nature like Kamsa, or one can be afraid because of their great powers with Indra or Lord Shiva. Like, Krishna has these battles. Indra is attacking Vrindavan, Lord Shiva is in a battle with Krishna. And again, Rupa Goswami makes the point that he makes several times that demons like Kamsa feared Krishna, but they have no rati, and therefore there's no fear rasa here. They don't have ecstatic dread in devotional service. Okay, going on to our last secondary Staibhav is Matsya, is the presiding deity because he's involved with destruction, or Lord Buddha can be considered the presiding deity because he showed disgust with material life, right? He left his wife and newborn son out of disgust with material life and took up renunciation. All right, ghastliness is described in Bhakti Visamrita Sindhu 4.7.1 through 14, chapter 48, second half. So basic understanding is attachment for Krishna because of feelings of disgust sometimes presents a ghastly ecstasy in devotional service. So he does not give a Vishaya, he goes right to an Ashraya. And the Ashraya for this disgust ras is usually the type of Shanta bhaktas, the type of neutral bhaktas who've performed austerities, not the Shanta bhaktas who were impersonalists. They're very neutral, but the Shanta bhaktas who came from austerities. Another ashraya for this ghastliness can be those in Dasi above who are in the ashrita category. So those who are surrendered to the Lord as protector to gain freedom from fear, who were previously jnanis and they're surrendered to the Lord to gain knowledge. This is a review. Or they're fixed in service, appreciating the Lord's sweetness. So they're interested in service. Their interest in liberation is to serve the Lord. So another explanation of these three types of devotees: previously in sense gratification, previously interested in liberation, or fixed in the Lord from the beginning. So these people can also be the shelters of this ghastly rasa. So an example of how a devotee could be the shelter of the ghastly rasa. Again, shelter means they're a kind of impetus to others. So when one feels ghastliness, one's inspired by these devotees. So persons formerly interested solely in the matter of lust and sense gratification, now chanting the names of Krishna with tears. And now when they think of lust, they wrinkle the face, become rigid and spits. And we can think of that even in our own devotee sangha, that we might see somebody who, or hear from somebody who was really involved in sense gratification, and now they love Krishna and they're disgusted at their former life, and that may be an impetus for us to also feel this ghastly rasa. So the anubhavas are spitting, distorting the face in disgust, covering the nose, washing the hands, and running. Sattvika bhavas are just quivering, horripilation, and perspiration. Vyavichari bhavs, shame, exhaustion, madness, illusion, frustration, humility, self-pity. This is the self-disparagement. Restlessness, eagerness, and inertia. So we see that the kind of lamentation at one's own fallen nature can be part of this ghastliness. This staibhav. So there's two basic staibhavs. So if you have at least a little rati for Krishna, this would be somebody who's a sadhaka. And you have some discrimination and you contemplate the nature of illusion. This would be, again, Raganuga sadhaka. and you feel disgust at the nature of illusion, or at all types of devotees. Now, this is interesting. I thought this is really interesting, that all types of devotees, if they have some love for Krishna, they'll feel this disgust rasa. Again, it's an ecstasy because it's coming out of love from impure and foul smelling objects. Right? So from discrimination, when a person develops attraction for the Lord, how can he be attracted to this body made of flesh, smelling of raw meat, composed of thick blood and covered by skin? And then another example is a child in the womb. I'm suffering so much because of this material body. I'm trapped within a mess of blood, urine, and liquid stool within the womb of my mother. I am suffering great pangs. Therefore, O divine ocean of mercy, please be kind to me. I have no ability to engage in your loving devotional service, but please save me. I want to really, really emphasize some. I want to really emphasize this is not aversion, it's an ecstasy. This is not aversion. It's not the Tyaga side of Bhoga Tyaga. It's not aversion. It is an ecstasy of love. It's stemming from love. Another common example of lust is we have been thrown by the wicked king into this prison, the summation of all hells, which destroys vision with piles of stool from sick humans lying in a yard infested with terrible worms whose stink makes the nose unsteady. O destroyer of hell, remembering you, we maintain our eyes. Now, this again, I thought was important, that there is nourishment of all the primary ratis, although disgust is generally felt by one in the neutral ras or in a certain kind of dasya bhav, that any devotee who has rati for Krishna in that love can feel disgust at small amounts of unwanted things. So in meat eating, illicit sex, intoxication, and gambling. But I was thinking even like Srila Prabhupada, you know, when he saw unclean bathrooms at the temple, he would be disgusted because he loves Krishna. Because he loves Krishna. If we're not disgusted by, you know, filthy, impure things in Krishna's temple, where's the love? Interesting, right? Little summary of the secondary ratis. So Rupa also seems to be, you know, he seems to feel, although he puts a lot of attention into these secondary ratis, both in the Southern Ocean and practically all of the Northern Ocean, he says, well, maybe they're not really such a thing as secondary ratis, maybe they're Vyabhichari bhavs. So it's like he's not quite sure, does he agree with Bart Moody or not on this? And this was also a help I got from David Bukta, that the meaning of Staibhav, whether primary or secondary Staibhavs, by Bart Mooney is quite different from that of Rupa. So Bart Mooney's understanding is, you know, in a literary work, a poem, a novel, a drama, the Staibhav means what is the emotion that stays for the whole work or for an episode or a chapter, you know, like the genre, you could say, of a book or a movie. Is it, you know, heroic? Is it romantic? Is it compassionate? You know, what is the overarching, you know, you go to a bookstore, you go to look at a movie review, it'll tell you, you know, here's the romance books, here's the heroic books, right? Or this is whatever, you know, is a dramatic movie, here's an action movie, here's a romantic movie, here's a comedy movie, TV show, whatever. So that would be the Staibhav, but Rupa understands Staibhav as the permanent situation of love within the devotees. And again, the secondary Staibhavs are stable only in relation to the primary rati and in the sense of leaving lasting impressions. All right. So are there questions about fear and ghastliness? So any questions about fear and ghastliness? Prabhupada Priya.
So is it that the Vishaya for ghastliness is always some disgusting thing? It's never Krishna or devotee of Krishna or
Yes,
the other
yes,
one.
it's interesting you bring this up. In fact, ghastliness is the only staiva, primary or secondary, where Krishna is never the object. You never discussed it to Krishna. So
And
it's the only.
I had another question that why is it that
Yes.
the Shanta Bhaktas who perform those austerities, why would that lead them to having this Jugupsa Rati?
Because their austerities, it gets them in this mood of disgust. That's why they're doing their austerities. It's very combined. You know, that they're giving up things. Now they may at first give up things in a mood of aversion, but as they develop love for Krishna, that transforms into an ecstatic disgust. We have to be very, very careful. I mean, some of you may be siddhas, but at least those of us who are sadhakas, or like me, I'm aspiring to be a sadhaka, we have to be very, 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 very careful that we don't mistake aversion for the ghastly rasa. We have to be extremely careful, or that we don't try to have sense control through aversion. Aversion is just another side of attachment. If you think of it, you know, if I'm holding something close to me, I'm attached. If I'm holding it far away from me, I'm averse, but in either case, I'm still holding it. And aversion is just as damaging as attachment. In fact, it can be more damaging because it's like a wolf in sheep's clothing. It looks like a ghastly rasa, but it's not. You know, we've seen this, you know, I know of so many former sannyasis whose all they ever talked about was how terrible women in householder life were. You know, that's all that came out of their mouths. And they were always, you know, yam yam vapis ram ram. You get whatever you meditate on. So they're meditating on how terrible women in householder life are, and they're meditating on that. And so they become attracted to it. In ghastliness, one is meditating on Krishna. And in meditation on Krishna, one naturally just feels disgust for things that are averse to Krishna, whether in oneself or in the world. But it's ecstatic. It's an intense ecstatic experience. Any other questions on fear or ghastliness?
Yes, Yamunacharya would be like a classic example of this.
Yes. But again, this does not mean the brahmacharis and sannyasis go around spitting on all the women. I mean, I was in a temple where that happened, actually. You know, I was in a temple where the brahmacharis would spit on the married men and the women. I mean, it was so extreme. Gopal Krishna Maharaj at that time was a householder, and he worked at a job in an advertising agency, and the brahmacharis would spit on him. And they would not allow him to give class. And then after Prabhupada wrote that letter saying that Gopal Krishna was qualified to be head of spiritual sky or GBC of India, but he didn't want him to quit his job because his job was important service. And he was worked on the advertising for Pepsi Cola and hair dye. Then all of a sudden the devotees started treating him with respect, but it was quite intense. All right, any other questions on fear or ghastliness? What example? The example I just gave was aversion, not ghastliness.
No,
Where people
but
had aversion.
it couldn't be seen such a thing.
Or how did they think it was ghastliness? They thought they were doing it out of love for Krishna.
No, but a devotee who would see someone behaving in this way doesn't make it would not be how poor persons, how they think this is service when it's not.
Well, then that's karuna ras. That's not ghastliness, that's karuna ras. That's compassion. I mentioned, I think instead of having a breakout room, because we're really low on time. So had they not heard of Vaishnav etiquette and aparad, I'm sure they'd heard of it. Now I forgot completely what I was going to say. Maybe Krishna doesn't want me to say it. It's completely gone. Okay. Apohanamcha. All right. Anything, Vinata?
I have a question, but not on this last, but from before. Is it okay now?
Sure. I mean, this is the end of all of the secondary stibobs. We have 4 minutes. So if anybody has any question, we can take in these 4 minutes. As again, I had a breakout room plan, but I don't think we have time. So any question on any of the secondary stibobs?
So I wanted to ask about this Karuna Rasa. It looks like that from Anubhavas that it's not very active, while like Dana Vira or Dharma Vira is more active.
I agree.
So would Prabhupada's work be considered more Dana Vira than or Daya Vira?
Yes, although it could be a mixture. It could be a mixture. Again, what we'll discuss in 2 weeks is the friendly and unfriendly mixtures. And I mean, just logically, one can see that being filled with compassion and then being moved to be charitable would be very compatible. But just being filled with compassion, come on. I mean, if you're lamenting, are you active?
No.
No, you're just sitting around lamenting.
Yeah.
Oh, Krishna's in Kali, you know, you just lament it.
And we just thought when we were speaking about like Dana Vira, a nice example, I think it could be nowadays this Parashuram from UK, he's distributing this free meals for Ukrainian refugees in Poland. So it kind of fits nicely into this category.
Yes, very, very good example. Very good example. And, you know, altruism is in this Dana Vira if it's done out of love for Krishna, not to be a pious person.
Yeah, which in this case, I mean, it's obvious.
Well, to those of us who know Parasuram Das, yes, it is obvious.
Yeah.
He's an incredible devotee. For many, many years, he would only sleep 1 day a week. So 6 days a week, he would sleep for 20 minutes at a time, 20 minutes total. So for every 6 days, he'd sleep only 20 minutes total. And then on the 7th day, he would sleep for 8 hours. I don't know if he still does that for many years, because I would see him doing all that. I asked him, I said, how do you do this? How do you do this, you know, food for all and Harinam? I mean, I would see him and always energetic. Again, this Danavir is a rasa of energy, of enthusiasm, utsaha. How do you do this? I said, when do you sleep? He said, well, I don't. He said, I only sleep 20 minutes a day. And I'm like, always? He said, well, once a week I have to sleep for 8 hours. How long have you been doing that? At the time I asked him, which was many years ago, he said, oh, I don't know, like 8 or 10 years. So he's not on the ordinary, not on the platform of ordinary mortals like me. I just want to remind everybody that next week for Gaur Purnima, there will not be a class. So we have a 1 week break. And after that, for those of you who are not in the United States, or for those of you who are in parts of the United States that do not observe daylight savings time, like Arizona and Hawaii, the time will change. So if you are on the US East Coast, it will be the same time. If you are not in the United States or maybe Canada, observing daylight savings time changing this weekend, it will be a different time. It will be different by an hour. So it's going to be the same time for me, but it's not going to be the same time for all of you. So that will be for our last 2 classes on the mixing of rasas and the semblance of rasas, a very fascinating and intricate topic. You'll have to figure that out. I'm not going to try to figure it out, because if I try to figure it out, I'm going to get it wrong. And that would be very sad. So the only way I trust figuring out these time things is I go to some kind of program or some kind of app, because I work in multiple time zones for decades, and I have become very hesitant at doing the calculations myself. If I do that myself, I often go in the wrong direction. So time and date, Rukmini's put up is a very good program. I have an app on my phone, which does a convert. So it will be the same time on the US East Coast. So it will be 5:30 a.m. Yes, wait until Monday. Yes, the time for us changes on Sunday. So again, this is applicable for those in the US who do not change time, like Arizona and Hawaii. And it's applicable for any of you in India where you never change the time, and in Europe where you change the time later. I know in India where you don't even have time zones at all, that you only have one time zone for all of India. These things are like, they're almost inscrutable for those of you who've never left India. Or if any of you are in China where you have one time zone, these things are just like, they just don't even make sense at all. It's just like, what are they talking about? But you will need to do that. Otherwise, you'll either be an hour early or an hour late. Okay, thank you very much. Whatever good you have found in me is due to Srila Prabhupada and all my teachers, and whatever bad you have found in me is me. Please take up the good, and please do not take up the bad. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Rupa Goswami ki jai.